My parents had 5 kids. I was the oldest. Things were pretty rough back then. I worked a lot of days for $1 a day for different people, shocking wheat or filling silos. And I remember things Dad used to do. He'd plant a field of corn, something, and wait 4 or 5 days, and we was just little kids. He said, "You guys want to go along? We're going out and see what the corn's doing." Pretty soon he'd take his pocket knife out and he'd try to flip the ground over and said, "See there, it's just ready to come through." Oh man, I thought, what's the matter with that old man? Who cares whether it's ready to come through or coming through? But I've done the same thing out there in the field, plant beans in my garden. I may flip the soil to see if they're sprouted. There's something about farming that's in your blood, and I don't know why you enjoy seeing a seed sprout and come up and start vining or whatever it's going to do. It's something it's in a farmer's blood.
I've lived in Miami County since 1965. I grew up on a 320-acre farm, just a journal farm. Had hogs, dairy cattle, chickens. We did work hard, but we had to. We didn't have the mechanics, the machinery, technology now, so what we had to make it up with the labor. I was never really satisfied doing anything away from the farm, even though I knew from a financial standpoint it wasn't very rewarding. It still isn't, but it is a great way of life, particularly with grandkids and children and great-grandchildren. It's a great thing.
I was farming with my dad one time I was big enough to get on the tractor. I stayed at home until I was about 17, 18, and that's when I went to chasing my wife. I went to Orland full time when we got married, and then I still went down home and helped farm for several years. When we bought this place, I got my own cows and was doing a little custom baling for the neighbors and taking care of my own place. And I come home one day and I met myself going, so then money was tight, so the cows left and I sold all my equipment, and then my back quit on me, so that's when I quit that.
The growth was coming down, you know, from the 70s where everybody was wanting to get out in the country with John Denver. It was the urban flight. People leaving the cities, and of course we're so close that it made it possible for people to live on the outskirts of the metropolitan area. It's very difficult to look into the future that far and see that eventually North is going to meet South, and we're not going to have any land. But bigger than that is preserving our natural resources.
I'd like to see it stay rural, as close as we live to Kansas City and everything. I don't know how it can. Everybody wanted a place in the country.
There's no going back. And I think in the influence of Johnson County in Miami County is going to continue to increase, and it'll bring a different philosophy, a different kind of person to the country, not necessarily better nor worse, just different. And everyone has to acclimate themselves to it, or they'll be left out and not have any neighbors.
Well, we bought about 1.5 years ago, and probably, you know, growing up like any young man, you know, you kind of have this like an idealistic picture of how cool it would be to be out on a farm. And I grew up in the city and wasn't around any of that, but always longed for it since I was a little guy. And I kind of gave up the dream and got into the corporate world for most of my life. And my son, he has some health issues that we started to feel like he would really benefit from being in a more rural and more natural setting. And we're going to be very diverse. I have grass-fed beef, pastured pork, pastured chicken, pastured eggs. We really feel like it's important for people to have a very visceral and genuine interaction with where their food comes from. We have a policy of being 100% transparent, that anybody can come on our farm at any time and look to see what we're doing, look to see what we're feeding them. They can peek inside my sheds and make sure I'm not have a stash of chemicals somewhere.
People have kind of resigned themselves to the fact that we are just going to be kind of swallowed up by the urbanization. We don't have to resign ourselves to having no open space and no rural character. There is a way to develop land that's very respectful to the land, that doesn't degrade the natural resources.
When we go through a major overhaul of the comp plan, there's always community input and involvement. With this plan that we currently have, that open space and rural character was very important. So I think that's where that conservation design comes in, and try to allow some of the smaller lot sizes, but still make sure we incorporate those areas of open space and the trails and all those things that people really need to feel healthy. I think it's important that we don't cover everything in concrete.
People a lot of times think of land preservation and conservation as an optional thing. We have reached the point where it's not an optional thing. Our natural resources provide very practical services to us. And if those things are lost, if our natural resources are no longer providing those functions, we have to create them artificially. We have to construct them. And typically, those structures are very much more expensive than keeping our trees. And they also never work as well. So I think that conserving and protecting our natural resources and improving the function of them and improving their value is a very practical thing to do. Through conservation practices, we have done all kinds of things to try to hold the soil in place.
I come home from the Army, I signed up in Paola to get a new tractor. It cost $1,595 for an M farmhaul. I got the first one in Miami County sold after the war. And we started building terraces and waterways. City people that own land out here would stop at the house. I remember one of them stopped and he said, I've been watching your farming. He said, I like what I see there. I started farming for him, and every time we were into 160 acres, we talked the guy into building waterways and terraces. Farmers, it took a while. They gradually had to get used to it,
Yeah, on our farm, conservation almost comes first, and then we build around that. Soil conservation in itself is, by definition, I believe, is to keep the soil in place. And to keep it in place, grass keeps it in place, terraces and waterways helps keep it in place. No-till has been here long enough to prove to me that the soil tilth and the soil life is much better.
It really begins and ends with the soil and soil health. One of the major management factors that goes into that is creating disturbance and rest cycles. So that's some of the reason for the temporary paddocks and the electric fence and moving the animals all the time, is because that allows us to recreate disturbance, and that hits the restart button on the ecology.
At one time, the neighbor that owned here behind us was running over 3,000 acres. He was doing it right. He was planting grass around. All these fields had grass around them to keep the erosion down. But if it wasn't for the chemicals, they couldn't do what you're doing. If you go organic, like Josh is going to do here, there's no chemicals involved. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. I've seen some of this tried, and there's a lot of work involved in it, but it'll work, but it takes a lot of work to do it. And There's some things I'm kind of skeptical about, and we'll see how it comes out.
We're conventional, pretty much conventional farming methods. We use commercial fertilizer. We use chemicals to control weeds. We don't try to do sustainable agriculture as such. Pretty much traditional in that respect. If you're going to raise cattle on a large scale, it's awfully hard to develop a market for the beef that you raise that costs more. It can be done, but that's not what we want to do. If our customers demand that we do not use GMO crops, then we will not be able to. But until that happens, today's farmer, with the size that they've become, they're going to be a GMO farmer.
Those things, I think, start with consumers, and certainly through most of my life, I didn't care where my food came from, and never taking into account the real cost of that, and what the cost to the animal and the cost to the environment, how that affects the farmers that are making it, and what they have to do to make ends meet, and shifting a priority away from how much my food costs to saying, let's get something in place that is a winning solution for everybody. I don't think the way we're doing agriculture right now is sustainable, and the way we've industrialized it, I don't think that we can continue on the path we're on. So part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I think it allows us to see a different way, and perhaps maybe one of many paths going forward in the future.
We don't even know some of our close neighbors, We never see them. They just don't understand how it was, but it's changing.
We've managed with the neighbors that are 20-acre landowners. We've gotten to know them, and they're very nice people. What I have noticed, there's little vineyards, and we have one within a mile of there that are happening, and I like them. I think they bring something to the community that's good. It's good for the community. And I like it. I like to talk to them. If you want to get along with them, it's not that hard.
I often think about what it would be like to be in Jim's shoes, and to think like, I've been doing this my whole life, and here this guy comes and he doesn't have any experience, and he thinks he knows this and that and the other thing, and I've already done that. I know that doesn't work, and so but he doesn't. He treats me in a way that preserves me.
I'm pretty strong-willed if I'm right, but I'm also flexible enough to let him figure it out. I've been there, and I didn't like it, so I try not to treat him very different than what I wanted to be treated. I think he'll make a go of it. I think it'll work. I'm going to help him all I can.
I've got a huge learning curve ahead of me, in complete, honest, and brutal reality. Jim and Julie have been a huge source of encouragement for me, and one of the ways their influences has really changed my ideas about things. I was really wanting to avoid machinery, and I kind of had this idea that I could do a lot of it without it. And while I think it's possible, they've really helped me understand the advantages that a good machine can offer. I had realized that I do have a big learning curve ahead of me, and so I got some ideas and some principles that I'm trying to do it by, but in full realization that I think that we're both gonna, moving forward, learn what works and what doesn't work.
They've been a blessing in disguise. We're the old folks that's been here the longest. We have a lot of new neighbors, and I learn from them as well as me teach them what little I know. A lot of it's just common sense, and Josh got a lot of common sense. Well, I'm getting to use it. When
The main objective is to have community and have a relationship that that when you come to disagree, it doesn't become adversarial, because at the end of the day, what do you have if you don't have community?
With the new farmers coming in and with the more experienced farmers, I think especially the livestock producers, I think we have a lot to offer the metropolitan area as a farming county. We can develop the county in a thoughtful way that preserves our most important natural resources.
There is a food movement happening, and especially folks in urban situations that have never really had a connection to their food, and they want that connection to their food, and wanting to see what it takes to get their food to their table. And so nothing can do that like a local farm.
I would love to see, if I lived another 50 years, that somehow we managed the growth in such a way that we have like streamway parks, that we still have our farmland, and somehow these little communities, Paolo, Lisburg, Osawatomie, Spring Hill, all of them just kind of grow up in a protected way. We have a responsibility even to our kids and our grandkids to make sure that we leave them with a good quality place to live, and leave it better than how we found it. So
Joel Salatin says that our farms should be sensually romantic. They should be a great thing to look at, a great thing to smell, a great thing to feel. As I think about why I'm doing what I'm doing, is for my boys and for their lives, and being able to provide a farming existence where they can experience a beautiful farm life.